so much on Canada. They want to just get those resources for free because it costs the state so much money. It's like, then if we become the 51st state, then they don't have to pay anything.
Mm-hmm.
Then we don't have to negotiate any trade deals or whatever.
Yeah.
They can just get it for free.
Yeah. Which is colonization, which is what we did to Africa. It's what we did to
indigenous here. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Land, everywhere. Yeah. The resources. Yeah. Oh, they have saffron. Oh, they have lithium. Oh, they have this. Then we must do whatever we can. That's exactly colonization.
I like salad. Do you like salad?
Welcome to Canadian Salad,
a fun, factual, and friendly podcast about culture and integration in Canada.
I'm one of your hosts. I'm Ho Shen Ho from China, currently living in Vancouver, unceded territory of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
And I'm your other host, Andrea McCoy, an immigrant from the United States, broadcasting you from the unceded traditional territory of the Lekwungen people, the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations.
And you're listening to Canadian Salad!
Welcome, everyone, to another Canadian Salad. If you're new with us, thanks for joining us. We're really excited you're here. I'm Andrea. This is Ho Shen. Of course, you heard that in the intro. We'll say it again.
Oh, maybe I am Andrea. You never know.
Ooh, maybe. Oh, and I'm Ho Shen. That would be fun and confusing.
That would be fun.
Yes. Yeah. But today we're going to really explore just the ways in which the recent threats towards Canada by the 47th president of the United States, aka the Cheeto head, how is threatening annexation and taking Canada. And we're going to really unpack that because this is, I think, for Canada. And I use Canada in air quotes because Canada it's the colonial name of where we live that was created by Eurocentric colonizers. So we're really going to camp on the ways in which the Eurocentric, or at least predominantly white Canadians, are experiencing threats of colonization because that's essentially what Trump wants to do.
Exactly. They even said he wanted to take Canada by force if Canada is not willingly join the States.
By force, yes.
I know,
yeah,
which is textbook colonization.
Textbook colonization. And this episode really actually stems from an opinion article that was out in the Toronto Star. We always include any reference we cite in the podcast in our show notes or on our website, but it's called Indigenous People Know What Trump Is Like, and it's written by Jody Wilson-Raybould, who's the former Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. She also is a descendant of a Kwakawak speaking peoples. So, because I think if we're going to talk about this type of colonization that Trump is threatening, I think there's a big piece missing, and that's Indigenous perspectives. So, Ho Shen, when you heard Trump's threats, what was going through your mind, or what did you hear in your circles or from other Canadians? Or, I'm just curious what your thoughts have been there.
I mean, after we heard that, of course, the first thought I have is, another crazy thing that he said, because he always says crazy things.
Yeah.
But this is like crazy to another level in the sense that like he's threatening war because we're all in the NATO's too. We're literally partners and trading partners.
Yeah.
And we share one of the longest like unsupervised border, a lot of border that we share where there's no like custom or anything. And yet now he's like backstabbed by a friend in some sense. Not that I think on the international stage, like friends between countries are really a thing, mostly just relationships and benefits. But still, like we literally share border with you for many, many years in peace. So I think that is a big, just crazy. And to be honest, I don't think a lot of us are taking it very seriously. If a lot of my friends also just think, it's a crazy thing that he said. I don't think he will actually do it. Where he, there's a lot of things that he said he also never really done either. I mean, also a lot of things that he did.
Right.
So that's kind of a lot of people just think it's like a crazy thing that this entitled, stupid white man say.
Yeah. Which they do. He does.
Yeah, what he does.
But he's also, in my mind, he's very serious. For me, I think I wasn't surprised honestly, there's nothing that Trump does anymore surprises me.
Hmm.
Like, I expect it. I think what it always does is it grieves me and it angers me, but it doesn't surprise
Hmm.
me. The other thing is that it's created this unity in Canada that hasn't really existed. I think before Trump came into power, everyone was so kind of divided. I could feel more of that division. Oh, immigrants this, and the rise in like MAGA or even white supremacy in Canada. I felt like that was growing stronger. We saw it in Quebec and things like that. And it's still there. However, the threats turned everyone into best friends. Like, people from Quebec are saying we're proud to be Canadian. Like,
I know even the French, which
historically,
is crazy.
when did that happen? When was the last time that someone from Quebec actually expressed that identity? I mean, there
I
is
know.
this unity that just has come out of like, and you see people from all parties, conservative, liberal, NDP, Green, all unifiedly saying, no, this is Canada.
mean,
This is
The conservatives are, their message is a little bit,
their messages. And there's been a few that have been endorsed by Elon Musk and some MAGA people. It has been very interesting, just that unity around someone threatening you, which is a very
yeah.
key piece, I think, as we unpack later. And then, but I also have felt like there's a huge missing piece. Before I even saw this article, I was thinking this is exactly what Europeans did to the Indigenous people of Canada on Turtle Island.
Yes, absolutely.
So you guys are surprised by this? Like, a lot of people who have been under the boot of colonialism aren't. So it's interesting because the privileged are now being faced with colonization. And I think, I think there's some missing pieces, which is what we're going to unpack next. So
Let's get into it.
Okay. So just to set our modern colonial stage, for those of you listening brand new, maybe you don't know what colonization is. You're not sure what that really means. You hear it thrown around. So I thought it would be good to do a little breakdown very simply of what colonization is defined as. So the Oxford Dictionary defines colonization as the action or process of settling among and establishing control over the indigenous people of an area. It is the act of appropriating a place or domain for one's own use. So this is the Oxford Dictionary. It is, and it does capture it pretty well, I would say. But this article actually had a really much better definition of colonization. So I'm going to read this Indigenous definition. Quote, colonization is a foreign power making threats to one's sovereignty, expressing an entitlement to one's lands and resources, who demeans and degrades one's leaders and systems of government, end quote, which is much more specific because I don't believe the British necessarily understood the very good definition in Oxford of colonization, but that a foreign power makes threats to your own sovereignty, expressing entitlement to one's lands and resources, demeaning and degrading your leaders and your system of government. I mean, hands down, that is exactly what happened to Indigenous people here, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
If we unpack just a little bit of Trump's threats. So initially it was 25% tariffs on goods to the U.S. from Canada, on everything pretty much if Canada didn't secure its border from migrants and fentanyl, which Canada did.
Yeah.
And then later it was 25% metal tariff threats where Canada actually would be hit the hardest. And then Trump has also said Canada will be the 51st state, referred to Trudeau as governor. He said in an interview recently that Canada is one of the, quote, nastiest countries to deal with, end quote. On the 18th, quote, they give us nothing. They're the worst people to deal with, end quote. So just those insults and, like you said, that backstabbing, the reality is these threats are actually as old as Canada itself, because this is exactly what happened with colonizers who came to this part of Turtle Island. And it dates back to the doctrine of discovery, right? Where, oh, we found land, we discovered this, let's go back. Hey, I discovered the Americas, and that was very much, and all of a sudden the ownership of that new land became something that the colonizer, the explorer claimed for themselves, which I could see. In some ways, Trump has taken credit for a lot of things that he didn't do, and or deals that he quote unquote made, but actually they were set up a while ago. The thing with even with Trudeau and putting putting the military and cracking down on fentanyl and migrants coming over the border, that was something that Trudeau and Biden had actually already negotiated back in December before Trump was even elected. And so for Trump to be like, oh, I made them do this, which he did claim. No, this was something. So it wouldn't surprise me that Trump would start to espouse rhetoric, like already renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America or Greenland. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not surprising from Trump, obviously. He always take credit for everything that he did not do that is good, and every bad thing that he did, he would just deny. Right. And also on the colonization of Canada, of the intention of, it's part of it also resources too. I think Trump also knows the states rely on so much on Canada, especially on natural resources, electricity, many other things too. They want to just get those resources for free because it costs the states so much money. It's like, then if we become the 51st state, then they don't have to pay anything. Then we don't have to negotiate any trade deals or whatever. They can just get it for free.
Yeah. Which is colonization, which is what we did to Africa. It's what we did to
indigenous here. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Everywhere. The resources. Yeah. Oh, they have saffron. Oh, they have lithium. Oh, they have this. Then we must do whatever we can. And like you were saying, like Trump will make a claim that he did something and then deny if he'll lie about other things. That's exactly colonization. Exactly. So there is a lot of parallels with Trump's ideology and just even this and colonization. So I think what I want to go down to next is really the reactions to Trump and the threats. I want to talk about Canada's overall reaction. So when I say Canada, people who are kind of born, raised here, mostly Eurocentric people. And then I want to talk about Indigenous reaction, because there's actually quite a lot of articles of Indigenous leaders speaking out within their positions of influence in their spheres and their communities and really saying like, this is what it means for us as Indigenous people. And just to go briefly, so there was a really... The Times columnist here in Victoria put out an article about Canada reacting to Trump's threats, from making pins to bumper stickers, hats, flags, and meals. So there's this restaurant in Victoria downtown called the Blue Fox Cafe. It's on 4th Street. I don't know if you ever went there. Okay.
I've been there before.
Okay. They created a new special on their menu. It's called the Trumpty Dumpty Breakfast Special. And a menu sheet on its window in the cafe actually shows the U.S. president falling off a brick wall topped with barbed wire coils. The meal features locally grown eggs, pan-fried tomatoes, bacon, sausage, and black beans. It's a hot seller, and they actually will give you 25% off the regular price of its island eggs breakfast. So, yeah. So anyway, they're just going into all of it. I love it. They were asked, why are you doing this? And the owners said, quote, because everybody needs a little help sometimes, and Trump is really scrambled. End quote. So a light tongue-in-cheek kind of taking something that is serious, but also just in a fun way of resistance, kind of like, oh yeah, well,
he is very punny.
Very punny. Yeah. And of course, we've heard in Ontario and even in BC that a lot of liquor stores have pulled off U.S. liquor. At first, it was red states. Red states in the States would be states who voted for Trump. So like Florida, Arkansas, Alabama, like a lot of these breweries, distilleries, a lot of provinces were like, nope, we are taking that off. I think Manitoba did it as well. Ontario threatened to cut off U.S. electricity. They've paused that. And then there, even right now, there's a huge water agreement. It's a treaty about 61 years old for the Columbia River. The Columbia River runs all the way up through Canada and all the way down to Oregon State. So it's a very large body of water. It's got dams, fishing, resources, power, electricity, water, all of these things. And that is becoming even a very tumultuous discussion right now between both Canada and the US. Minister Eby has also threatened to cut off water resources for Americans. This is how they're reacting. And then in a recent Ledger poll, more than 1 out of 3 Canadians actually said that they would want to move to another country if the US absorbed Canada. People are really like, I don't even want to be here. Even Mark and I, my husband, we're like, we didn't move far away enough from the United States. Like we're literally, we can see Port Angeles, Washington, right across the water. And I'm just like, oh, no, that's where the invasion starts, right? But then there's also been sentiments of betrayal and disbelief. Again, to the backstabbing and the best friend.
Yeah.
And I feel that in some ways, that's how sometimes it starts. It's people use and build trust in order to then take advantage of them later. And this happened all the time with treaties that were made. And then, no, we need that forest. We want to build that pipeline. Rip, rip, rip. That betrayal, that broken trust, that you're no longer a person of your word. And that's another form of colonization where you won't uphold to the things that you've committed to do, which is exactly what the US, or at least Trump, is doing right now to Canada in the same way that colonizers did to Indigenous people. There's so many parallels,
Oh, yes. I think, as you mentioned at the beginning too, I think people just now to have this kind of realization and maybe even empathy towards Indigenous people or people who were colonized, because now that they are facing that threat, now that is more than just words on a paper.
Right.
Now that's actually a threat in front of them.
Right. Exactly. That's my hope. I don't know that our leaders see that, but we'll get into a little bit about why Canada really needs to realize its true allies are right here on Turtle Island. So I want to talk a little bit about the Indigenous leaders' reaction to all of these threats. So as lighthearted as the other reactions were, this is, and we've talked about this, that usually underrepresented groups or marginalized people are often the brunt of decisions that are made because already their rights, their access to human resources or just basic necessities are already hanging by a very small thread. And so any kind of decision or alteration of that can really, really undermine so much. So there was, out of global news, the Métis Nations met with Trudeau. This was before he resigned. And they expressed to him that actually, if there are going to be tariffs, the people that are going to be hit the hardest are those of us within the North because of the already pre-existing food scarcity. Like it's already hard for us to access food, and these tariffs are going to actually even more so impact our accessibility for food.
Yes, we had an episode last week about food insecurity.
Exactly.
So maybe everyone can take a listen and to see how already the situation is already bad.
Right, exactly. And you can see that like someone's making a little fun joke off of breakfast to underrepresented groups who are saying literally we won't have access to food. This is how serious we're taking these tariffs. This is how serious we're taking these threats because they impact us so much. There was another gathering of the Territorial Sovereignty Assembly of First Nations. The National Chief, Cindy Woodhouse Napina, said that, quote, territorial rights of Indigenous peoples on both sides of the border are recognized by international law and predate the founding of both countries. She goes on to say First Nations lands hold the key to much of Canada's wealth, critical minerals, and energy resources that are pivotal to domestic prosperity and trade with the United States, end quote. So, yes, you can say you'll conquer Canada, but honestly, we're thinking about not only Indigenous people here, but Indigenous people on the other side of the border who would bear the brunt of what's going to happen because much of the resources that we had were taken and controlled by colonizers. And so you double down on the colonization, like you recolonize all of that. It's so important to understand And for myself, but even for those of you who are listening and maybe new to colonization, like it's not just about, oh, well, we'll just have sovereignty over your land. You can do whatever you want. As long as we're in charge, you can do whatever you want. It's never about that. It's all about dominance and power and control. And that's what would happen, essentially, if we were annexed, because we would be subject to a totally different government. And a lot of Indigenous rights and treaties are actually in place with the crown. I was talking with a good friend of mine who she's Haida Gwaii, and she was saying that without ties to the crown, there are certain rights that Indigenous people would not have because the crown acknowledges certain things, and that's what made their rights accessible, at least
The
in
treaty,
Canada. Yeah.
some of the treaties, yes, the
Yes.
treaties are under the crown. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
yes.
as much as people want to be like, oh, off with the king, we don't need that. It's like at the same time, there's a relationship, like we're tied to this. And
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, of the king, then you have to have some sort of new system to replace that, right?
Right.
Because that's the system we're working on now, that we're using now. So if you off the king or no longer monarch in Canada, then you have to replace with something, and then you have to some of these things, treaties, you have to renegotiate, rewritten in some certain ways. And also back to if we are taken by the states, of course, we will lose a lot our way of life in many ways because a lot of things we have been enjoying, like even public health care, we were not able to enjoy it. And then or even go to the ICE, they've been detaining everyone that they don't agree with. Like even I think yesterday I saw news that a French scientist was detained by ICE because they found his phone is criticizing the current President Trump. So like they will detain people even though he is a scientist visiting the States with the invitation.
Yeah.
Legally.
Yeah.
But they detain him just because he disagreed with the president. Like what?
Yeah.
Like things like that would happen to us too.
Right.
If the states eventually do take over.
Our
Which let's
podcast
hope we won't.
we
will not be able to talk about Trump. We will get arrested.
No. I mean, I wouldn't want to stop, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Like it would, I've even thought about visiting family and I'm like, no, they would see I would probably be detained as well. But that's where we are. Like it is serious.
It's crazy though, thinking about that though. Like for people who voted Trump even, I really want you to think about that. Like just because we criticize him, we should go to jail. Is that the country we want to live in, that this authoritarian system? Do we want to be North Korea? Is it what everyone wants?
Exactly.
I don't understand who people voted for him and still stand by him. Do you want to be North Korea?
Yeah, and in total agreement with everything that's going on. Yeah.
Which is crazy to me, but anyway.
There's another person, his name, Chief Roger Redmond of Standing Buffalo Dakota Nation. He said, quote, "Our connection to these lands isn't just historical, it's living and breathing. Our ancestors fought to protect these lands. We honor them by ensuring that our sovereignty remains intact today. So when I hear talk of a 51st state, I don't just hear politics. I hear a reminder of why we stand strong and why we continue to assert our rights," end quote. This is why I just feel like, where is the conversation and is it happening? We'll unpack a little bit how it's not. But why aren't we having these full-on council, big table agreements or discussions with First Nations over, what is it? There's like over 500 First Nations in Canada. Why aren't they at the table? They understand more than any of us how to navigate threats, how to navigate colonization. In a lot of these articles, a lot of these resources, a lot of these First Nations leaders, Indigenous leaders are saying, we know what it is to have these conversations. We really want to sit down with Trump and say, what is it that you really want? Not that he would listen, I think.
I think that's the thing, right? I think as we also just explore that part of colonization is about taking control or like humiliating, ridicule of their governance, of their leadership. I think that we're still on that route. I think we still think they're less than us. We think that their way of governing, their way of leadership is not as, I don't know, efficient or as civilized as the way that the Western way of doing it. So I think in face of threats like this, they definitely would not first think of the indigenous way of dealing with this. So how would they do it? How would they negotiate this? It's just another representation of how colonization works in some sense.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And so that's why our last point, honestly, is that Canada needs to realize that if they're looking for people who they can work with and actually respond to Trump, they're already here. I think it was Mark Carney, the new prime minister, who went to Europe. And the headlines and all the articles are like, Carney goes and talks to allies about the threats of annexation. Has Carney met with First Nations leaders? I don't know. Maybe there's a news article out there. If y'all have it, send it our way. But it's a matter of this country's obligation and responsibility to the truth and reconciliation. That's what truth and reconciliation is. If leaders actually think that truth and reconciliation is really important, then you would have their voices, Indigenous voices, at the table, because that's what it is to, one, truth, acknowledging that, yeah, this is what we did to you. How did you deal with this? And what do you advise us going forward? Right. And then it's that reconciliation. It's like, you're equal to us. You are at the table. If leaders really want to push back on Trump, they would have recognized the importance of having Indigenous people at the center, those more familiar with tyranny and colonial mindsets. Drawing on the wisdom within our midst from Indigenous people is really important, because without that, you're always going to revert yourself to the very colonial way, which is just fight back. That's
By
it.
force, yes.
By force.
And sometimes just like Trump.
Yeah. Just like
I want
exactly.
something. Yeah. I want something, I'm going to put a flag there.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's ours, and it's like colonialism fighting colonialism. Honestly, it's like you can't fight fire with fire. Like you have to, like, where's that water? Where do you bring in another solution that's actually going to maybe deter things, or maybe postpone it, maybe push them off for a year or so, buy yourself some time. There's so many different ways. And yet we're not engaging with Indigenous people as part of the truth and reconciliation commitment. And then the last point is there's this idea, it came out of 2004 with the UN. UN was wanting include more policy regarding their work around the world with persons with disabilities. And they came up with this slogan, nothing about us without us. This idea that we're not going to make a policy without those very people in the room making that policy, which is something that Canada has failed repeatedly, where, we'll make this decision. Well, yeah, but your decision's going to affect that group of people. So
and
why aren't they in the room?
That group of people, yet that group of people is not counseled.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same with immigrants and all of these immigration cuts. It's like, Mark Miller, do you got a team of immigrants and migrants at your table informing you? No. No, of course not. But you're going to make decisions about other people without other people.
Even Mark Mueller, he even said we cut the numbers because of economic consequences or whatever. But like, what you don't know that before? What's the economists counseled before when you had that big number years ago, and now you cut the number because you suddenly realize the economy was suffering? Like what?
Yeah,
I don't think he ever counseled any people, economists or experts from that aspect, and he just make all the decisions based on whatever arbitrary reasons that he has. Sometimes even biases, if you ask me.
Right. Exactly. When colonial forces are acting and forcing themselves on other colonial forces, there's got to be an alternative. There's got to be something. Some other
way of
resolution.
Yes.
Of resolution. Yeah.
I agree.
I just want to read this last quote from Jody Wilson-Raybould in that article. It's a very good article, a very good opinion piece. She says, quote, in the face of efforts to eradicate us and our ways of life, we learned how to advocate and push back on intrusion into our lives, use public institutions and systems as a defense against a hostile state, build allies and alliances to bolster strength, and to maintain and adapt our systems of government and law. We also did these things with a focus on building consensus of approach, recognizing the importance and power of unity and our interconnection, all of which are values and practices we must all be upholding right now, end quote. And I love that building of that consensus approach. It's like, let's come together, build like some kind of, at least understanding of where we're all coming from, and recognizing the humanity in every single person. And we're not just going to come out with our fists swinging, but that we're actually going to come with, here's a glass of water. Here's a plate of food. Now let's have a conversation, because we're looking at this. We're looking at you, the oppressor, and we're saying there's something missing. And I think that something missing is your humanity, because your humanity is not being regarded when you try to colonize us. It's gone. And so in some ways, it's a bit of restoring that to the table. And I just don't see that restoration. I don't see that being a part of the conversation.
At least from our side.
From the outside, yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of these articles, like people who were interviewed, Indigenous people from various communities or even other leaders. They said, we hope whoever's in government is able to stand firm in that there is no annexation, there is no 51st state. We're proud to be here in Canada, and we're proud to make sure that doesn't happen. And we're here, bring us to the table. Let's have a conversation together. It can be both. It can be both.
I agree. It definitely can be both.
Yeah.
It can be a lot more inclusion. I think this can be an opportunity for us to really unite. And now that, as we mentioned, that we have seen so much unity happen in Canada before, but I think the government can take a step further to have more people on the table to talk about, how we can stand up, how we react in the face of possible colonization, and find out other solutions rather than just give me terror, I'll give you terror. Oh, you want to fight? I'm going to fight.
Yeah.
This must be other solutions than that.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of our episode. I don't know if you have any last thoughts about all of this, Hoshin, or anything, but I just thought when I saw the article, I was like, that's exactly why there was this piece missing in my mind. Because as much as what I've seen on Trump's threatening Canada, this looks very familiar. Oh, we've learned about this. Oh, we've talked about this. Oh, people have experienced this. And I apologize, we don't have an Indigenous voice at the table, but I really hope that just by amplifying what people have been saying in the media, and that you would go to these articles and you would read what people are having to say, Indigenous people, and hopefully that informs more of how you perceive just your own standing and your own privilege within this country. Because I feel like, who am I to say that this is how we need to do things, and this is because I'm coming from a very strong place of privilege. I haven't known colonization. Why should I be the professional in handling colonization and colonizing threats? I shouldn't, if I have no experience with it other than being
I agree.
the benefit.
Well, yeah, I think most people
benefactor.
who are most people on the table in the government right now have no experience of colonization, and yet they are making all the calls.
Yep. Yeah. So do better, Canada. There's options. There's options. And there are people.
There's people. There's always help.
Yeah.
Especially with so many different kind of people in Canada. There's always people that with experience, with knowledge, with wisdom that we can go to.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need to be going. We need to be going to people who understand it the best, So
I agree.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Anyway. So that's our episode. And we are going to end. If you're new to our episode, first time listening again, thank you so much. Follow us. Make sure you get to know who we are. You can go to our website and sign up for our newsletter, canadiansalad.ca. Go there and sign up and make sure you get all the amazing information about our podcast. But we end every episode with a Canadian salad pop quiz. Hoshin and I have both selected questions that neither of us know the answer to. So it is dramatique, and it is a way to just
It's dramatic.
to help us know more Canadian history context related to this topic. So Hoshin, would you like to go first, my love?
Yes, I would love to go first. Thank you very much. My question is, well, now that in the face of U.S. taking over Canada, in history also there has been some conflicts between us in the border. The border has not always been very peaceful. So how many times do we have this kind of violent conflicts between the US and states?
Times?
Between US and Canada.
Oh, does that mean there's more than one? Because I know of the one time, like at the very beginning. Really? Oh my
Yeah, more than
gosh.
one.
This is a really great question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to guess 8.
8.
Yes.
8? Is that your final answer?
Yes.
Okay. The answer is very close. Very close. You're very close. 7 times.
Really?
Yeah. There's 2 major wars and 5 regional conflicts, but
Oh my
it's between the border
gosh.
in small regions. Yeah.
Really?
The 2 major wars are the American Revolution War in 1775 and the War of 1812.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Okay.
there's 5 other kind of smaller because of certain economic or political regional conflicts.
Okay.
But they're smaller. But 7 times, yes.
Oh,
We include a link
wow.
so you can really look into it and
That would
see
be
what they are.
interesting. Yes. And that doesn't include all of the battles at the hockey games recently that have been happening, like the fist
No.
fights. No.
I'm talking about like military was involved,
Military.
obviously.
Wow. Okay. Not hockey guys. Okay. Okay.
Not
Good
hockey
to
guys,
know.
no.
Good to know. Good to know. Okay. All
Okay.
right.
What about
Are you
you?
ready? Okay.
Yes.
So, how many, let me see. Okay. We'll do this. How much of the world's global population is indigenous? What percentage?
I don't know. I have an idea. Maybe like 11.
11%. Okay. Is that your final answer?
Yeah. Yeah, final
Okay.
answer, yeah.
You are 5% higher than the actual amount.
Oh,
So this is according to
6%.
Amnesty International. So there's more than 5,000 different indigenous peoples around the world, comprising 476 million people, which is around 6.2% of the global population.
Oh.
They are spread across more than 90 countries in every region and speak more than 4,000 languages. So really cool. But yes, that's how many, and they go into defining who is indigenous. So you can go to
Ooh.
that website and look that up. So that's our Canadian Style Pop quiz. Well, we both almost got it. Not entirely, but we were close. So
We were close.
job,
We were close. That
Hoshin.
means we
Good
have an
job.
idea of what it is.
yes, yes. Was so educated. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. New folks, people who've been listening to our podcast for a while. Really appreciate you being here. We love to hear feedback. So just if you want, shoot us a message. hello@canadiansalad.ca. Again, sign up for our newsletter and be sure to follow us on Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok.
Yes, please give us a message. We're desperate for your attention.
Yeah, exactly. And we just love knowing that you're out there. So anyway, we'll talk to you next Tuesday. Have a beautiful week. And thanks for joining us. Bye.
Bye.
Canadian Salad is written and produced in British Columbia, Canada by Hoshin Ho and Andrea McCoy. Theme music is by Naver Avetyan from Pixabay.
This has been a good Drinklin production.